Good evening. Tonight, we are witnessing a moment that will be studied in history books for generations to come. The Supreme Court has delivered a historic ruling, one that shakes the very foundations of American power and sends ripples across the globe, from Washington to world capitals. In a decision destined to echo for decades, the court struck down President Trump's use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs worldwide, declaring such actions unconstitutional. This isn't just a legal technicality. It's a fundamental reassertion of the constitutional balance of power, dismantling a key pillar of the Trump administration's economic and foreign policy, and redefining the limits of executive authority. The ruling's impact is immediate and far-reaching, touching international diplomacy, the global economy, and even the prices Americans pay for everyday goods at home. President Trump's strategy of using the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to bypass Congress and wage a global trade war has now been halted in its tracks, raising questions about the future of U.S. trade policy. The court's decision also nullifies the president's recent ultimatum to European allies over Greenland, sending shockwaves through NATO, unsettling diplomatic alliances, and triggering volatility in financial markets worldwide. At its core, this is about the limits of presidential power, about whether one person can reshape America's economic relationships and global standing without the consent of Congress. Today's ruling forces the administration back to the negotiating table, both with foreign leaders and lawmakers on Capitol Hill, setting the stage for a new era of debate and diplomacy. The question now, what happens next? The world is watching, and so are we. Stay with us for continuing coverage. To grasp the magnitude of today's ruling, let's rewind to April 2025, a month that would mark a turning point in American economic and legal history. That's when the Trump administration invoked IEEPA to impose blanket tariffs on nearly every nation, an unprecedented move that stunned both allies and rivals, sending shockwaves through global markets. IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, was originally designed for targeted sanctions against hostile regimes, not for sweeping economic policy or bypassing Congress on matters as fundamental as taxation. Critics from across the political spectrum argued this was a dangerous overreach, since the law doesn't even mention tariffs, and warned it set a precedent for unchecked executive power. By using IEEPA, the administration claimed the power to tax Americans without congressional approval, sparking a major constitutional showdown and raising fundamental questions about the separation of powers. The administration argued that global economic threats justified this extraordinary action, but the result was chaos. Unpredictable tariffs, business uncertainty, and widespread economic anxiety that rippled through every sector. Tariffs generated revenue, but at a steep cost, higher prices for consumers, supply chain disruptions, and a chilling effect on U.S. manufacturing that left many workers and families feeling the pinch. Instead of boosting the economy, the uncertainty led firms to cut back on hiring and investment, with small businesses and major corporations alike struggling to plan for the future. The IEEPA gambit, meant to project strength and resolve, instead created instability at home and abroad, straining diplomatic ties and rattling financial markets worldwide. Today's Supreme Court decision is the long-awaited legal reckoning for that gamble, a moment that will shape the limits of presidential power for years to come. The constitutional debate erupted into crisis last week over President Trump's renewed push to acquire Greenland. The administration issued an ultimatum convinced Denmark to sell Greenland or face escalating tariffs, targeting key NATO allies. This aggressive use of IEEPA stunned diplomats and threatened the stability of the transatlantic alliance. Europe's response was swift. Retaliatory measures were discussed, and military assets moved to Greenland. Global markets tumbled, and the US dollar weakened amid fears of a trade war. The Greenland standoff made the Supreme Court's review of IEEPA urgent and real, not just theoretical. The president's willingness to leverage emergency powers for territorial ambitions highlighted the dangers critics had warned about. The Greenland gambit became the dramatic backdrop for today's historic ruling. Today, January 20th, 2026, the Supreme Court delivered its answer. In a landmark 6-3 decision, the court ruled that IEEPA does not grant the president authority to unilaterally impose tariffs. The majority opinion reaffirmed that the power to tax and regulate commerce belongs to Congress, not the executive. The ruling invalidates the Trump administration's entire tariff regime and nullifies threats against European allies. The court emphasized that Congress could have granted tariff authority in IEEPA, but chose not to. National emergencies, the court said, cannot be used to rewrite the Constitution's balance of power. The administration must now seek tariff authority through Congress. The dissent argued for more deference to executive power, but the majority's decision stands as a major check on presidential authority. This ruling reasserts Congress's role in economic policymaking and sets a precedent for future presidents. The Supreme Court's decision sent waves of relief through Europe and beyond, as citizens and leaders alike tried to process the magnitude of what had just unfolded. The ruling was not just a legal milestone, but a turning point in international relations, signaling a possible end to months of escalating tension. The immediate threat of tariffs vanished almost overnight, averting a major economic crisis and restoring hope for renewed dialogue between nations. Markets responded with optimism, and business leaders breathed a collective sigh of relief, seeing a path forward for trade. European leaders welcomed the ruling, but remain wary. Trust has been eroded, and calls for greater EU autonomy have only intensified. Behind the scenes, officials debated how to safeguard Europe's interests in a world where alliances can shift so quickly. Globally, major trading partners like Japan, South Korea, and Canada expressed hope for a more stable, rules-based system. Many saw the decision as a chance to reset strained relationships and strengthen multilateral cooperation. For China, the ruling removes a layer of unpredictability, shifting focus back to structured trade diplomacy. Chinese officials signaled a willingness to engage in talks, but also hinted at the need for vigilance in future negotiations. The White House called the decision disappointing and politically motivated, vowing to pursue its economic agenda by other means. Administration officials began exploring alternative strategies, determined not to lose momentum. With its most powerful tool gone, the administration faces a tougher path ahead. The loss of leverage means new challenges in shaping global trade, and uncertainty about what comes next. The world is watching to see if President Trump will work with Congress or seek new ways to exert influence. Allies and rivals, alike, are bracing for the administration's next move, knowing the stakes remain high. The alliance has been preserved, but the landscape has changed. As leaders gather at global summits, the need for trust, cooperation, and recalibration has never been more urgent. The economic impact was immediate. Global stock markets surged as the threat of a trade war faded. Wall Street celebrated, with the Dow posting its biggest gain in months. Industries reliant on global supply chains saw stocks soar, and the US dollar rebounded. Business groups praised the decision for restoring certainty and the rule of law to trade policy. The end of IEEPA tariffs lifts billions in costs from American businesses and consumers, easing inflationary pressures. However, the abrupt change brings challenges. Companies must readjust supply chains, and the loss of projected tariff revenue impacts the federal budget. Some industries may face renewed competition as protectionist measures vanish. The era of unilateral presidential tariff power is over. Future trade policy will require congressional approval. While the transition may be bumpy, the overall economic outlook is positive. A new chapter in U.S. economic policy begins. Legal and economic experts see this ruling as a turning point in the debate over presidential power. The court drew a clear line. The president cannot unilaterally rewrite economic laws or impose taxes. Scholars say this reverses a decades-long trend of expanding executive authority, especially in emergencies. The decision returns accountability for tariffs to Congress, where public debate and transparency prevail. The ruling also signals how the court may approach other cases testing executive power, such as attempts to influence the Federal Reserve. Experts warn that unchecked political control over economic institutions risks inflation and instability. Ultimately, the decision reestablishes crucial guardrails, affirming that Congress, not the president, holds the power of the purse. The Supreme Court has reaffirmed a foundational principle: emergencies cannot erase constitutional boundaries. Today's ruling is part of a larger struggle over presidential power and the independence of economic institutions. Another key case before the court involves President Trump's attempt to fire Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, allegedly for policy disagreements. The Fed was designed to be insulated from political pressure, ensuring stable economic decisions. Critics argue the administration's actions threaten that independence, aiming to influence interest rates ahead of elections. The court has signaled the Fed holds a special, protected status, allowing Cook to remain pending a final decision. Paired with today's tariff ruling, the Cook case tests the guardrails against politicizing the economy. The battle is about whether economic policy is shaped by law and expertise, or by executive will. The next major indication of the court's stance will come with the Cook decision. Tonight, America's system of checks and balances was tested, and it held. The Supreme Court's decision reaffirms that economic power belongs to the people, through Congress, not the president alone. The administration's strategy of unilateral emergency powers is blocked. Now it must negotiate and build coalitions. For allies and trading partners, this brings stability and a return to a rules-based order. The immediate crisis has passed, but rebuilding trust will take time. This story is a testament to the resilience of democratic institutions and the importance of legal checks on power. But it's also a warning: norms can be challenged quickly, and vigilance is essential. The principles at stake, balance of power, rule of law, democracy, directly affect our lives. Stay engaged, share your views, and help safeguard our democracy.